G'day and welcome to Cuba de Rio. I'm Matt Scolle, and that's the last time I can say this in South America because today I'm flying out to Sydney, Australia. That means this could well be the last episode of Cuba de Rio as well, so we've got a lot to get through. Let's start with thank yous at the top here. So thank you so much to all of you for listening throughout this whole adventure. It's really been fantastic having people enjoy your trip, and especially through a medium in which I had absolutely no training and professionalism in beforehand. So the fact that there are people that have listened right from the start and have stayed with us until today, that's something very special. And I don't know what kept you here, but you stayed. So cheers. Thanks very much to Mum, because it was on her credit card which we paid for all the hosting services the entire year, which I could have easily forked out the money for that, but she did it, and I very much thank her because this podcast has been a huge part of my trip and has really been a defining feature for me, wandering into a group of strangers and being able to say that you have this bank of work behind you and a project has really been put me on a different level to the rest of those pottering around this continent, and I've really enjoyed it. To my girlfriend Chloe for writing to me every day and just being a constant source of support and interest in this trip. Unparalleled. Yeah, it's been great being able to wake up every morning and just fall back onto the same conversation that we've been having from day one of this year. It's been absolutely brilliant, so cheers for that. And in this episode, what are we going to get through? Well, as you've probably been hearing, it starts at New Year's Eve here in Santiago, which was a big affair. In Chile, they wear plastic hats and the like, and plastic hats and ties to usher in the new year, 2016. What a year that was. Yeah, I mean, I think I'll say this again at some point in the thing, but I am so sorry for 2016, the way it turned out. Because I feel Donald Trump and Brexit and all the uncertainty that you see in the world now is entirely my own fault, as the universe tried to balance itself out in any way, shape or form possible. Because I was just over here having the best time from top to tail, and the universe needed to do something in order to counter that. And I think the events we will see in 2017 will be as a result of that, so my deepest apologies. But yeah, we head down to Patagonia once again, back in Patagonia, but this time to do the Torres del Paine hike, which is an absolute classic in Chile, and to get to know the Magallanes Strait and all that stuff right at the bottom of the world. So it's a fantastic place to end the trip, I must say, and I had a wonderful time. And this was a song I recorded in Uruguay a long time ago now. And I don't know, as soon as I heard it, I thought this would be a great way to end the last intro of my podcast. So here it is, and enjoy the episode. I'll be home soon.
Señoras y señores, bienvenidos a Punta Arenas. A partir de este momento...
We flew into Punta Arenas at dawn, which in Patagonia is about 4 a.m, so it's a rather wonderful time to fly into this part of the world. And Punta Arenas itself is pretty spectacular, as it's the largest community of Chileans here down on the Magallanes Strait, once the world's greatest thoroughfare around the bottom of the American continents. However, ever since the construction of the Panama Canal in 1912, the traffic has fallen substantially, and this place has slightly reverted back to being as wild as it once was. One of Puntaarenas' defining features, however, is in its central square, where you get a little bit of information about why Patagonia is called Patagonia. And it's because of the Indian people that lived here, and there is in fact a bronze statue of the Patagon. Pata meaning foot, gon being a shortened version of grande, which means big, so Patagonia, big foot. And this was because of the Indian populations that lived down here. And there's an Indian hanging off the main statue in the town there, whose foot is just languidly hanging down at about head height, and it's become a tradition in Puntaarenas whenever you're going up that way to kiss the Patagons to big toe, and this thing is polished clean with all the lips that are blessed as the tourists swing through Puntaarenas to get to the Torres del Paine National Park further north in Puerto Natales. And Puerto Natales, as well as being on a spectacular fjord, is just obsessed with one creature, the Mylodon, who was discovered in a cave about 25 kilometres from Puntaarenas. And it's a rather weird sort of conglomerate cave, this thing, surrounded by what was old glacier country. And the Mylodon is a gigantic 11,000-year-old giant sloth that used to live in Patagonia before all the megafauna here in South America, like those in Australia, died out due to climatic changes and hunting from human beings. But we were only in this part of the world to get to one place, and that was the Torres del Paine National Park, which we were content on doing one of the two walks you can do, either the O or the W, and we happened to find enough of the reservations that remained to do the W walk. First day on the W trek, and already it has been the most spectacular day of my trip to date. We had absolutely crystalline blue skies with little UFO clouds in the high atmosphere there, which is highly unlikely for Patagonia. And we saw this spectacular panoramic view of Torres del Paine National Park as we came in on the bus this morning. But our first day's hike took us all the way up to this beautiful beast, the Grey Glacier. And although this silent monster is not making any noise from us now, I'm sat probably about 100 metres above its carving face right here, and it's the evidence of this glacier's like clawing across this earth. It persists for at least another 100 metres above me. So this thing used to be an absolute beast, and even now it is amazingly huge. But to have seen it in its full glory when it was probably about 4 or 5 kilometres wide would have been absolutely spectacular. But the carving face has dropped off a lot of ice this year, and Pascal, who did the hike we're on now last year, says this year there is an awful lot more ice floating in Grey Lake, and in fact all the beaches are littered with ice cubes, and I managed to get close to some, which was exciting. And just to give you an idea of what glacial ice is made up of, I lifted up one of these icebergs that are coming close to shore, and you can hear all the water trickling down through its insides, which is a pretty magical sound. But in addition to that, it gives you an idea of the sort of interlocking random puzzle pieces that make up icebergs. And yeah, they are just the most beautiful things to look at and hold in your hands and taste. The water tastes delicious here, and the ice, really, it's just fun to crunch in your teeth, knowing that you're crunching probably 3,000-year-old ice and breathing in bubbles that have not been released into the world for several thousand years. It's absolutely spectacular, and this is only day one. Waking up early in the Torres del Paine National Park is a unique thing, because you come out before all the hundreds of other tourists in your campsite, and all these animals have come around the campsite to find the scraps that the tourists leave behind, including foxes and all these lovely little birds that are hanging around. And so you get to experience a little bit of the wildlife in Torres del Paine that is getting used to the huge numbers of people that are eroding the tracks in this part of the world. And we were doing the W walk, which is named the W walk because of the shape it takes, which has these 3 arms shooting up into 3 parallel valleys, forming a giant W. And the middle of these arms is the French Valley. And it's an absolutely amazing place. Here you are surrounded by lush green forest that hasn't been burnt like some of the other parts of the Torres del Paine National Parks. I've been told Israelis have accidentally been setting up camps where they shouldn't be, and have lit numerous fires which take off easily because of the dry conditions and wind in this part of the world. But the French Valley, you're just surrounded by ice on all sides, ice and rock and trees, and the French glacier, which is hanging on the left-hand side of the valley as you're going up it, is this huge beast that was just crumbling ice in the rather hot weather that we had. And even though I had the tape running for almost about 15 minutes on this thing, it refused to give me a single ice fall. But we'd experienced so many, and it just didn't want to give me one. And so I was nearly about to pack up, and then finally we got one. But I did take that long wait as the final spurn by South America telling me it was time to get going, pack up my things, and head on home. But we still had a number of days in the Torres del Paine National Park, and it's got so many defining features, but the weather is one. We only had one night of rain, which in tense makes it sound so much worse than it actually was. But the absolute defining feature of the Torres del Paine National Park, if it's not the ice, is the wind. And the wind here takes many forms. Strong, persistent wind that scares the bejesus out of you as you come around a corner and surprises you in your face. And then sometimes you get those horrific gusts that I experienced in Argentinian Patagonia as well. And we happened to be in a tent one night when one of these such storms came our way. And the terrifying thing about this wind is you can hear it creep on down the mountain towards you, and you hear it coming and breaking trees and throwing stuff around you, and you never know when the gust is going to hit, and then your tent's flattened against the ground, and it made for quite an uncomfortable night's sleep. And just the fear of knowing or not knowing when one of those gusts is coming towards you, it kept us up for the entire hour in which we were being affected by this sort of wind. And then on the day when we had to head up towards Torres del Paine, the Torres being these magnificent stone pillars that stretch up to 2,000 metres in height. It's absolutely spectacular and very rare to see. But we had a Lonely Planet Guide cover conditions and saw these things completely just silhouetted against a crystalline blue sky with a few clouds rolling off the tops of them, their beautiful rose granite slopes glowing in the sunlight. It was absolutely amazing and a spectacular end to our time here on the W Walk, with the wind, the ice, and these incredible mountains which are definitely characteristic of the south of Chile. For my last adventure in South America, I decided to go to the most southerly continental lighthouse on South America and in the world. It's called Lighthouse San Isidro, and it's one of the 16 very old lighthouses which line the Magellan Strait and guided the old traffic through this part of the world when it was one of the world's main trade routes. But it's just an untouched part of the world. The road ends some 10 kilometres away from this lighthouse, and you have to walk yourself in. And I did get some miserable weather on my first day. And I was borrowing a tent which wasn't quite up to the task, and I was so tired after doing the W and then hiking this 15 kilometres in and crossing a river that I just crashed in my tent until I realised it could not put up with 16 straight hours of rain. And so it was me and my puddle for the entire 6 hours, curled up trying to protect my gear from getting too wet. It was not an enjoyable night, but at least you guys get to experience it with me and share the pain. But heading back towards the lighthouse, where my third last night in South America would take place, was excellent. Beautiful day, cleared right up, and the best thing about hiking to this part of the world is that you have the beach on one side, and you're always walking along the beach here, and then on the other side you have this perfect view through the trees of the most magnificent coastal forest. And it's nothing like the forests that you got in Torres del Paine, which are dry, which are full of sort of very old, bent and broken trees. These trees are lush. There's moss everywhere, and the birds absolutely love this. And there's multiple communities of birds. Those that live off the plentiful amounts of seaweed on the beach, like the ones that you can hear now. And once you go into the forest, like you do, you come out onto the beach and into the forest, just slipping out of these two environments the entire time. It is an absolutely incredible walk. And you get to experience all these different little birds enjoying their different little ecosystems, despite being only meters apart. It's absolutely magical. And then at night, we had this long sunset, which took hours to go down the Magellan Strait as we were there. And I'd found these lovely people that could keep me in a nice warm bed for that last night in the Lighthouse keeper's cottage. And we watched the sun go down behind the Magellan Strait as the whales and dolphins sailed past. And it was just one of the most fantastic ways to end what has been a marvellous trip and one of the defining years of my rather short life.
All my bags are packed, I'm ready to go. I'm standing here outside your door. I hate to wake you up to say goodbye.
Well, guys, the idea behind this part would be that I was speaking to my girlfriend and I was like, how do we end this podcast? Like, what sort of things should we do? I really need to sit down with someone and have them interview me about the year. And she was like, why don't you just ask this audience that's been with you the entire time? And I was like, shit, all right, I should have definitely have interacted with these guys that have been with me for this whole time way earlier than now. But here we are at the last episode. And I decided to write out to you guys and see if any of you guys had questions about the trip that I could answer in this final episode. So we got a variety of responses, all from people close to me, which is good because they asked thoroughly interesting questions. And I don't know, let's see what we find out about my reflections on the trip. In the meantime, Sue, easy one to start off with, from Janet Foster. Are you sad to leave, and when will you be back? And when I crossed the border into Chile, in fact, I definitely felt like this thing is coming to a close because that was my last border crossing, and I attacked that first week in Chile with as much gusto as possible, and I tried to fit in as many things that I could into my time, and I was like, it's all ending, the year's coming to a close. But by the time I got to this last week, and especially these last few days here in Santiago and Puntaarenas, it's been pretty darn chill, and I spent an awful long while in that tent with the rain, and in some of those moments I was very keen to be at home in Australia rather than here in rainy Puntaarenas. But sad to leave. I don't know. This trip has been it's crazy to say now, 8 years or 7 years in the making since I left Costa Rica after my exchange there, and had promised to all my friends to come back for the Rio Olympic Games in 2016. So to be at the end of what was a long-term goal and having completed it, that's a massive achievement. And to have seen and done all the things that I've managed to fit into this year, it's absolutely immense, the task that I can look back on. So in terms of seeing a chapter of my life go by that I know will be difficult to repeat, I'm very happy that I've done it. But right now I'm definitely forward looking, and I'm keen to get home and see those at home that I need to say hello to and to show some affection to. And it's all eyes. Yeah, I'm looking forward to being comfortable and not spending money as well. So that's definitely on the agenda when I get back. But when I get back, to South America? That's an interesting question because I don't know. I have left many parts, even though I've been here a year, I didn't quite fit everything in. And the way that we rushed through Colombia, given the abnormal way I entered it by a sailboat, that chewed up several weeks of what I could have spent in Colombia. So I really only spent a week in mainland Colombia, and I know people that spent a month or 2 months doing Colombia alone. So there's an awful lot there to come back and see. So South America, who knows? Could be the potential that Chloe, my girlfriend, gets a internship in French Guiana. So I could be back within a month and a bit. So that would be nice. But I think it's more than likely that I'll end up in France next year. Emily Young, scariest story, most heartwarming. Let's start with the latter. Most heartwarming. I think most heartwarming, I would say. Okay, so I spent 4 nights in Curitiba couch surfing with a guy called Val, and we just got on really well, and he invited me to his friend's parijada, if you remember that, and I got to know this rather weird city of Curitiba really well with him. And for a lot of people, they skip Curitiba and there's not a lot to show, but he showed me the absolute best time in Curitiba. And he made that step of the trip for me entirely. Just the relationship that we formed together over those short number of days. You get very close to couch surfers because you're very similarly minded with people that open their house to backpackers and the like. So we got on extremely well. And then nearly 2 weeks later, I was in Florianopolis. And Val drove the 400 kilometers between Florianopolis and Curitiba, slept in his car overnight to then do tours with me around Florianopolis, which he had lived in several years previously, and so knew the beaches really well. And we just spent this day together in Florianopolis, which would not have happened without this guy doing the 800 kilometer round trip to Florianopolis and back. And I know he was there to see some other friends as well, but the fact he included me in that little leg of his trip, that was so unexpected. Scariest story. I don't know, in terms of scariest moments, walking through Rio and some of those late nights coming back from the Paralympic Games at 1 or 2 in the morning on my own back to the hostel, they weren't too nice. Last night, I was walking from this bus station to the apartment that I'm staying in at the moment here in Santiago, and I was sure after this year of fabulous luck from beginning to end that last night someone was going to grab me and take all my shit. But that didn't happen, but I was still pretty freaked out. But the scariest story, I think, definitely Bolivia, when I tried to go to La Higuera, where Che Guevara was killed. I thoroughly underestimated the distances involved in getting there. And so I took a bus. I don't think I included all of this. I included the... I don't think I included all of this in the podcast. I included some of the sort of warmer moments of this, but it was definitely a foolish decision. But I took a bus several hours towards La Higuera. From the bus station, I jumped in the back of a ute, which took me another hour down the track. And then from there, I walked, hitchhiked, was sat on the back of a motorcycle for an hour and a half, getting closer and closer to La Higuera. And by the time I hopped off the back of the motorcycle, I walked maybe 12 or 16 kilometers with all my gear, passport, my computer, everything. And I was just in the middle of Bolivian mountain, and no car passed for about 5 hours. And night had fallen, and I was hiking with my light throughout the night, and there was just no one around, and no homesteads or farms or anything. And so I just pulled off the road and sort of set up my sleeping bag on a patch of dirt and was like, let's just hope the pumas don't get to me during this evening. And I fell asleep under the full moon, and that was a thoroughly daft decision because I'd forgotten my water bottle in the back of one of those vehicles. So I had no water. The only food I had was a tube of honey that I happened to have with me. And I was, if that's the sort of story you see on the Australian news, an Australian backpacker dies in Bolivian mountains, and I put myself in that position, and I felt rather daft. But yeah, that was, I reckon, recognizing my vulnerability in that situation, despite it turning out fine the morning after, was rather scary. And the same questioner, in your opinion, what is the best reason to do the same trip? So what would be the best reason to do the same trip that I've done? And I don't know, I'm reading all these questions for the first time, more or less, so I haven't given an awful lot of thought to them. But I would say the most honest answer to that is the fact that I could do this trip again, Cuba all the way down to Chile, spend the same amount of time a year, and not see the same places twice. I reckon that is an absolute draw card to South America. It is so dense, and to know it like I feel I know it now, I could come back here and visit entirely new parts, meet entirely new people, and be confident that would be just as good a trip as the one I've already had, north to south. That is the guarantee that this continent gives you. It's so fantastic from top to bottom. And I reckon the fact that there's so much undiscovered South America still to go, I would definitely do the south tip, the cone of South America, with a tent, and that would let you do a lot more in Patagonia and the like over this season, and do it cheaply. And yeah, there's a lot of more hiking, a lot more national parks and forests that I have not seen and not experienced, and they're all sort of trailing in my dust, and I could come back and visit any of them anytime. So that's really exciting. My brother Stephen says, how would you say this year has changed you compared to your year in Costa Rica? So a bit of context in this one. I was 15 when I was in Costa Rica, and I was living with a family there, learnt Spanish, living in a fantastic host town that gave me an absolute flavour of absolute taste of Costa Rican culture, as all Costa Ricans refer to it, like the cattle culture and all that. And they let me travel as well. So I really discovered what it was to be independent in Costa Rica, and plan and budget and learn to travel while I was there. So that, having that reined in coming home, was a little bit of a shock to the system. But how would the changes I've seen this year compared to then? I don't know. In Costa Rica, I was traveling with people my age, so 15, 16-year-olds living in hostels and like, and we were surrounded by older people all the time. They were like, what are these teenagers doing in our hostel? And to me, those people were always my age, like 24, 23. But when I traveled this year, that age gap was the same. And so the people that I was traveling with this year were always 31, 35. And they had all worked these corporate careers and just had burnt out. So the thing I've learned this year is what time I have, more than anything. So I've traveled an awful lot for someone my age, and I understand that thoroughly now. But the fact that there are people a decade on that approach this trip with the same sort of sense of not sure what I'm going to get up to in my life, and what career I'm going to do and everything, and the fact that they're a decade down the track, I think that's given me a decade's wriggle room. Mum's going to hate me saying that, but it's given me a decade's wriggle room to really continue to travel, continue to push myself and learn new things and experience new places while I've got the money and time. And that's certainly one of the motivations behind going to France next year, is that I don't want this train to stop. I would love it to go at a slightly slower pace and have a warm bed to go back to. That's my own every now and again, but there's the world has been opened further yet, I would say, after this trip. From my darling mother, Kim Scollay, You have met many fabulous people and interviewed many of them. Who else would you have liked the opportunity to interview that would help you inform your listeners about South America? And this is something I've been thinking about a lot, especially given when the podcast was sort of decreasing in frequency over Argentina and Chile, because I was speaking almost entirely Spanish the entire time with these incredible people, especially hitchhiking along the Carretera Austral. Hitchhiking along that, you met just so many varied people with varied experiences of Chile, its dictatorship years, all their, you met such a breadth of people on that road. And the fact that I limited this podcast and its interviews to English language really sort of limited its scope as to what I could what I could record and what experiences of other people I could seek out. And so the fact that I'm pretty proud of the record we have in getting people from the countries I visited onto the podcast, but the numbers are still skewed rather well towards the gringo audience and the gringos that I was traveling with. So it's I feel this South American's perspective that I did not capture, that at least for the Spanish speakers out there that listen to this, they could have enjoyed that thoroughly. Moving down, we have one from my mate Agnish. You've now travelled extensively throughout a number of continents. Where in the world feels most like home apart from Linfield, Australia? And I would say in Brazil, the city of Florianopolis was amazing. It was like, if you think back to video games when they could only do small open worlds, and so they would have like an island with city on one side and then open road on the rest of the island, and Florianopolis was exactly that. It had this amazing bustling metropolis on one side, and then as soon as you crossed the mountain range, it was just open wetlands and beaches on the other side, and the sort of suburban feel that you had on the other side of that mountain range of that island and the beaches in Florianopolis were spectacular. And the fact you had to drive everywhere, that reminded me so much of Sydney, and really that was one of the few places I found this year that I could settle down in and spend some time. Florianopolis, I had a great vibe there. But I don't know. Yeah, that definitely answers that question pretty fully. My brother Tim, who has asked the most curliest of questions. Through what eyes did you see the world a year ago? And how are your eyes now? Well, let's answer that question as well as I can. Through what eyes did you see the world a year ago? I would say when I booked these flight tickets in April of 2015, that I was doing this trip to I don't know, the motivations were to follow Che Guevara's path, to work at the Olympic Games, and to spend a year on my own and see if I could do that. And I must say, just before I got on this trip, Chloe Porchot came along into my life and slightly changed that. And we had 2 and a bit months in Sydney together before I was on the plane to Cuba, and we've continued that long distance relationship throughout the entire year. And that's definitely shaped my perspective of what the future holds and what sort of things I'm looking for in the next few years. And that's where my eye's at now, Tim, if that answers your question. So I'm still looking to travel, I'm still looking to know places, but to have the urge to spend that with somebody else and get to know them in that process even further is my main motivation for what's coming ahead. So that's something that I didn't expect. And to be honest, I I honestly booked those flights in April of 2015 thinking, you never know, you're going to meet so many people on this year's travelling that you might just meet that mystical one. And you might have a girlfriend throughout the trip, you might end up in some other part of the world, but to think that all that preceded the trip and has shaped the trip, and I don't know. Chloe definitely gave the trip a completely different flavour, which it wouldn't have had without her. So Tim, did you have any mystical experiences while travelling? I did magic mushrooms in Mexico. That was spectacular. So where were we? The fact I can't remember the name has nothing to do with the effect of chocolate. It's the fact I've visited so many places, but it started with P. So the fact I'm sat in front of a computer saved me. So it was in Palenque, which had this fabulous jungle Mayan temple real close by, and we were staying in this community which is notorious for its psychedelic drug use, just on the border of the national park there in Palenque. And taking mushrooms was one of the sort of selling points of this place. And so with these Argentinians, we all bought our mushrooms, we all jumped in a van, and they took us to these waterfalls called Rodrigo something or other. But they were these magnificent waterfalls surrounded by jungle that were sort of these lime domes that had the water flowing over it in these sort of thin laminas on all sides. And you took these mushrooms and waited a while, and then the world sort of did funny things. And so in one instance, I was looking at the ground and noticed the leaves spinning, but when you focused on the leaves, they stopped spinning. And sort of just strange warpings, all the lights were twinkling and the like. But when you stepped into the waterfalls, you had the water just rushing over your feet, and your mind split into these two consciousnesses, which is the only way to describe it, because in your feet, your mind was it was very fast, it was very quick, and then the rest of your body was still slow and gluggy from the effects of these psychedelics, and your feet were just, they were having a party of their own down beneath you in the water there. It was amazing, and it affected my balance, and I fell into the waterfalls and into pools and the like, and still had complete corporal control, could swim around and the like, but the sensations of that was definitely mind altering. I enjoyed that experience thoroughly. What else did you have? Do you have a philosophy of travelling you would like to impart to us? I would... philosophy of travelling you would like to impart to us. I would definitely say, because people want to see the big ticket items, so I'm framing this within the limitations of what normal people do when travelling. My philosophy now would be travel for a long time and spend more time in less places. That is what my philosophy would be towards that, because the pace at which I did Central America was absolutely insane. Doing 2 nights, 3 nights in a place and moving on to the next touristic location, that I could not have kept that up for the whole year, and I'm so thoroughly glad that I didn't, because ever since the Rio Games, I've had more time to spend in the places that I am, and I've taken them slower, and I've got to know the people there. Couch surfing was amazing. So, yeah, there you go, Tim. You've cracked open a little philosophical nugget there. Less places and more time. I met a Kazakhstani guy that says he likes traveling and doing a month in a place because he doesn't think that any less time you can get a real feeling for it. So he's a Kazakhstani doing tango classes in Buenos Aires because he was living there in an apartment, getting a real feel for Buenos Aires and its tango. Its tango scene, which I thought was a spectacular way of getting to know the world. But a month in each place means you definitely got to choose your place as well. Whereas I would say instead of spending 2 nights somewhere, double that to 4, and if you're really enjoying it, 5, and do that sort of pace of because it means you can visit things you like again and explore a little bit more of the times you're in. Also, if weather's an issue, then it gives you a little bit more time to visit the places when they're nice. What else have we got here? The Chloe Push Show. Now that's a name we've heard before. Having travelled through most of South American countries, do you reckon there's some kind of unity in South America? Within the political left of South America, undoubtedly. But within South Americans as a whole, not the case. There's very strong nationalist movements here in South America, reinforced by the fact that they've all historically had wars against each other. So Chile, for example, stole Bolivia's access to the sea back in the late 1800s when Bolivia and Peru ganged up against it. And it's also had tensions with Argentina over Tierra del Fuego in the Pinochet era. And so there's all these historical nuggets which the nationalistic right here in South America can easily turn into xenophobia against its neighbours. And so I feel an economic bloc like the EU or something of that nature happening in South America. I think the Mercosur, as it currently exists, will probably only deepen in its economic relationships between the countries. There will not be a singular political unit for South America. They are, despite the similarities in their cultures, each country feels entirely distinct from its neighbours and is very proud of its history. So that's the answer to that question. Based on which criteria: history, culture, people, ecosystems. I believe I covered most of that. In terms of ecosystems, though, here's another reason for disunity in South America, is that the indigenous populations here are very strong politically these days. That was not the case in the 20th century, but right now indigenous movements are really flexing their muscles, and that comes from a cultural similarity born out of the ecosystem in which these people live in. So for the Amazonian tribes in Ecuador that are fighting against further oil exploration in the Amazonian basin, the Bolivians, of course, being the multi-pluralistic nation that it is, the government actually recognises, I think it's, I can't remember, but it's a huge number of individual indigenous groups are recognised in the constitution of Bolivia. Not all of them, but they are a multi-plural nation by law these days. And that's definitely born of the distinct Andean culture that they experience there in Bolivia, which is one of a kind and makes Bolivia one of the top places to visit on this trip. You'll experience the Andes. In terms of a natural formation that influenced culture more than anything on this trip, I think the Andes produces just the most fabulous diversity. Like living at altitude, the food is incredible. The giant corns, the multiplicity of potatoes, and the sort of agricultural society that they adore up there. It's fantastic, and the Andes as a spine of this continent really provides a lot of its cultural depth as well in that. Cracking question. A secondary question from Chloe was, how many days in a row have you worn the same t-shirt as maximum? Not daring to ask about underwear. I reckon it depends, because there have been points, especially on this Torres del Paine walk, where I was carrying 25 kilos and sweated through my shirts quite a bit, but due to necessity, I was wearing them many more days than they probably should have been worn. So I think maybe 4 days would be my limit in terms of clothing. I realize now, when I packed for this trip back a year ago now, I took a lot of my favorite shirts. And what that's meant is that I haven't been able to rationalize my bag down to what it really should be, which is not the 18 kilos it normally is, but it should be around 12 or 15 kilos, like every other long-term backpacker. But it's mean that I'm genuinely traveling around with a good wardrobe, and so I do not have the need to really wear shirts too often here. I can switch them out quite often, quite regularly. And a final question here from Chloe, which I believe is the final question of the lot, is which dish are you most excited to make your loved ones discover? Dish, as soon as you include food, my mind jumped to drinks, and I can't wait to make canchacharas for my family. In fact, I bought them a litre of Panamanian rum here in Santiago to take back to them to make canchacharas, which are a spoonful of honey with half a lemon of juice mixed in with the honey. Then you get your shot of rum on top of that, and you fill up the rest of the glass with ice and lemonade, and they are the most spectacular cocktail. And I encountered them really early in my trip, and they have become my sort of go-to cocktail whenever there's someone I really like along the trip and I want to show them a good night. We'll whip out the canchacara recipe, and that's a cracker. In terms of food I want to make back home, inspired by the cakes and bread making actually here in Chile. So they have great German cake tradition here, and they have cushions, which are sort of these cheesecake mixes with local fruits and berries in them. I would love to make a cushion, and I got a pretty good biscuit base recipe from one of the houses that I stayed in, which is 200, 150 is the rule. So 200 grams of flour, 100 grams of butter, and then 50 grams of icing sugar, and you mix that together, and that forms a pretty cracking base apparently for these sorts of cakes. So I'm definitely keen to make that. But in terms of meals, my risotto, I don't think I've touched on this risotto at all, but in a hostel back in Uruguay, only one burner of the eight burners on this gigantic stove was working. And so my idea of doing sort of a pasta sauce with rice fell through immediately because I couldn't heat up the two things at once. And so I decided to mix my rice in with my bubbling tomatoes and vegetables in their sort of watery sauce. And what was created on that night has shaped my diet irrevocably for the last 3 months. And I effectively made a single pot risotto, which I would say has composed more than 70% of my nightly meals ever since that point. And it's just so simple. It's just tomatoes, whatever vegetable you choose, a bit of water, you cook your rice in the tomato juice, and just salt and oregano and whatever other herbs you have available in the free food basket at said hostel. It's an amazing dish, and I've been raving to Chloe about this particular dish for ages because it's been honed to perfection. But I'm sure a gigantic pot of that is on its way, and it's a scalable meal as well. So 2 giant tomatoes for a single person with your quarter cup of rice, and then you just sort of add a tomato for every extra person coming to the meal. It's that simple. Yeah, it's a fantastic food. And I think unless I'm controlled next year when I'm living in Europe, that will definitely be some proportion of my diet as a whole. But that is it, guys. So what a trip.
I'm leaving on a jet plane.
and gentlemen, welcome to Sydney, where the local time is just after 10 to 6 p.m. on Thursday, the 19th of January.
And that is it for another week. Thank you so much for listening. It's been an absolutely incredible journey. I've been home a whole week now, and wow, it's been amazing mixing what is going to be the last Cuba podcast and putting it together. And you may be wondering how we're going to end this thing, but I came up with the idea for this all the way back in Mexico, and I thought, what better way of ending this podcast than hearing what my dog Molly was like when she first saw me when I arrived in Sydney. And so I hopped out of the car, whipped out the mic, and captured what is an adorable little segment. So thank you so much for listening. I'm Matt Scolle, and you've been listening to Cuba de Rio.